Let's see. Deanna, you grew up in Pinole.
Right.
What was it like? I wasn't here. I grew up in Los Angeles. So tell me, give me something that I can think about now being here in Pinole.
If I start, maybe it'll come to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Only because I'm a little older.
Right. Okay, so we'll get going, all right?
Right.
So, hi, I'm Norma Martinez Rubin with the Pinole Historical Society, and I get to read some things about life here in Pinole, but you've actually lived it. So, Deanna Faria Brownlee, and you are sister to Dolores Faria Lucas, and you're the eldest of the sisters, yes. I understand. You have 3 sisters.
Yes.
So I share that with you. I'm the eldest in my family. But I grew up in a large city. I grew up in Los Angeles. So I would like to find out from either of you or from both of you what it was like to grow up in Pinole.
Well,
and what years were those?
Okay, well, I believe when I was born in 1935, I think there was around 700 people in Pinole. Don't quote me, but I believe that. And it was a very rural town. It was mostly a farm town, even though Pinole had some homes and businesses downtown, but it was actually a farm town where all the farmers would get together and help one another from the moment they got up in the morning till the moment they went to bed. If it was to bring the cattle in, if it was to brand the cattle, if it was to to bale the hay, if it was to pick the tomatoes, which my father was known as the Tomato King, and milk the cows. We had a lot of the young boys in town that got their first experience on the ranch. My father took them under his wing because he had no boys. I was the oldest girl, another girl, and then Margaret. So he took them under their wings and brought them up to the ranch, and they would go out in the fields with them, bring the cattle in, milk the cows, go out in the tomato fields, pick the tomatoes, go to the cannery with them. So I
went to the cannery with them.
I was about to ask either of you, though, where were you all this while?
Well, he would finally take us to the cannery once in a while in the truck. And we would go out into the fields when he did have the tomatoes picked. And I can remember going into the house asking my mother for a loaf of bread and a knife so we could go I did anyways, out into the fields and have a tomato sandwich. Because the tomatoes were beefsteak tomatoes. You don't see those around anymore. And getting back to old Pinole, it was a town of people together. They all helped one another. My grandmother would take in sick people. She even housed them in some little, rooms that she had in places out on the ranch. She took care of, sent food. That's the one thing they did when they came to this country. The Portuguese, this town was settled mostly by Portuguese people, even though there's other nationalities that also helped in this town. But she planted, I believe around 15 to 20 fruit trees. She had vegetables. She had blackberries. She had apples, fruits, vegetables. She canned every year, and when they canned, they brought in my grandmother had 9 boys before she had a girl. 9 boys before she had a girl. So she had to depend on hiring some men because her husband went to work at Hercules Powder Company. He did not work the ranch. And he came from around the Panama Canal. She came into New York on a ship, and her sister was in San Jose, and her sister said, I have a man out here. She was 15 and a half years old, and I have a man out here that saw your picture. He'd like to see you and marry you. My grandmother came on the train all the way from New York and met this man and married him at 16, and he was 32 years old.
Oh my goodness. So those were your grandparents. Now your parents owned the ranch in the location where we now have Kaiser Permanente.
Yeah, after my grandmother owned it first. She had the first 4.5 acres, and then she got the rest of the property behind there, and they worked it, as I said, with all the other ranchers up the valley.
That's your father?
Yes, my father. As I said, my grandfather went to work at Hercules. But the point is that they all stuck together. They all worked together. They all did things for one another. And you don't find that anymore. I mean, you barely get somebody to say hello to you and shake your hand. You don't find that closeness. And the thing about this town, it had, Mechanics Bank. It was the Bank of Pinole. And in those days, my mother didn't really actually go to a store and shop because everything was canned on the ranch. My grandmother canned jam, fruits, vegetables, everything. I mean, we were in that kitchen working all summer. And she had 4 daughters, and they would all get in there, and then my mother would bring her sisters up, and they'd all be in the kitchen, and we'd all be peeling and cooking and doing everything. But the thing is, when my mother would go down to the bank and deposit money, well, she'd put so much money in the bank. This is a cute story because sometimes she forgot that she didn't have enough money, and the banker, Mr. George Drudra, would call her up and say, "Margaret, I'm going to take some money out of your savings account and put it into your checking account because you need more money." That's the kind of thing we had in this town, the closeness of people. And the grocery store, she paid the grocery store man twice a year for her whatever she bought in things like bread. Most of the time they made their own bread, but there's certain things that they bought at the grocery store.
Sure, sure.
So
you talked about things going on in the summer, and then what was going on, of course, in the fall? You had winter.
Well, in the fall, my father baled hay. In the summertime, he got the hay, cut the hay, he baled it, and brought it and put it in the barn. She's going to talk next.
Now, Deanna is chuckling here, about to laugh. Do you have some funny memories?
No, what
of
I
those
was going to
times?
do, I was going to move over and let her talk.
No, please. I'm sure you were part of this as
go
well,
ahead.
right?
You remember the baling of the hay? Go ahead.
Oh, yes. God,
All right, then
yes.
you go.
No, yeah, I would go with my father out in the field when he had baling of the hay. Actually, it was a hay press.
A hay what?
Hay press.
A hay press. Tell me
Hay
about
press. You talked to, what's Shirley's husband's name? Alfred Ramus?
Ramus.
He worked the hay press. I remember him on the hay press when I was like
With his
10.
brother.
So the hay press is what makes those bundles.
Makes those
rectangular
bales.
bundles.
5-wire bales.
It was bales.
Oh, bales.
It wasn't
Okay.
round, like you see in maybe Montana or Idaho. No, they were square bales, and they were 5 wires, which was a killer for men to lift. Later years, that turned to a 3-wire. But I would go out to the field, watch him work the horses, because work with a horse. The baler was there, and several men worked on it, and there was a horse that pulled this, did something over here that pulled the hay up, and I don't know. That's what's his name.
So it sounds like the men or the boys did a lot of the heavy
they
lifting,
did.
the heavy work.
They did. They
and
did.
and certainly a lot of work there. But the young women or the girls.
We didn't really do that much.
My
So you had
father-
an easy life, would you say?
No, well, no. I mean, we worked around the house and the kitchens and stuff, canning and things, or peeling. But my father didn't really allow us into the fields.
Right. Or
With the
when he
young-
was working cattle. Didn't want us around that either.
Didn't want the girls
Was that
around.
for safety reasons?
Safety reasons, yes. And of course, there was all young men around, and I think he was being very protective.
Of course,
His daughters,
yes.
right.
Now, tell me about school. What was school like? Going to school, going to classes. Do you recall
Well,
that?
it was the old school on the hill. I went all eighth grades up there. She did too. And I remember in the morning I'd walk to school, which wasn't really that far, but a little bit.
Well, from our
And
house.
then I would walk home for lunch, walk back to school, and then come back home. Never took my lunch. Always came home for lunch.
Sure, yeah. So, did you ever run into your school teachers here in Pinole?
Well, not
during the regular week.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
some of them, yes.
Yes.
Did they live
The
in
Yellow
here?
Horse family lived over there by the
Yes,
railroad.
but we didn't have any yellow horses for teachers.
I did.
Yeah, I didn't.
I did. I had the Yellow Horse sister.
And of course, now there's an Yellow Horse Elementary, something named after her.
And they
Yes,
lived over there
yes.
by the station. Not the station down by the water, the station up there by the
The old Santa Fe station.
Santa Fe.
Across from
And
the Downer House.
My father, Mr. Ellahorse, was one brother and 5 sisters. None of them ever married. One sister was a school principal, and a couple of them were school teachers. The other one stayed on the little ranch over there.
I tell you what, if you want to know more about teachers, you're going to talk to Stella.
We will be talking to
Okay,
Stella.
she knows all about that.
So,
Yeah, because she was a principal there.
No, she worked in the school.
Not principal. She was
She worked in the school.
so
secretary.
is that Stella Faria?
Freitas,
Right.
Faria.
So-
She
now
was
Stella-
married to our cousin.
So did that happen a lot, of course, because people knew each other in Pinole?
And they would get together
they
with
would
other family.
Now, was it such that Portuguese Portuguese families, for the most part, were the ones who were here at that time.
Right.
And was it forbidden to marry out of the Portuguese? Or
They wanted you to marry in the Portuguese. Yes, they.
It wasn't. I want you to marry Portuguese.
Oh,
you know.
I disagree. I disagree.
Well, she did. I
did
did.
you ever have some non-Portuguese boyfriend?
I never did. I had all Portuguese boyfriends. But really, in the older days, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, they wanted you to marry in the Portuguese family. Yes, they did. I mean, and if
Was
you,
that did that seem stressful, or did that seem limiting to you, or did it just make sense?
Not to me.
well, for me, it was just the boys were Portuguese that I met.
Yeah, right. That's about what it
who was
amounted.
out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't marry Portuguese, but I wasn't pushed to do it either, you know.
So, Deanna, you still live in Pinole,
Right.
and you live along
Pinole Valley Road.
yes,
Right down from Kaiser.
right down from Kaiser, so right down from the land that used to be where the home in which you grew up
Correct.
was.
Correct.
Yeah. So, do you ever miss the sounds of that house, the laughter and
Yes,
goings
yes,
on
I think
that was
so.
happening?
Yes, I mean, after I got married, I moved where I live now,
Uh-huh.
and I was up at that house every day. You know, I was raising my kids. I get in my car. I wouldn't walk up there. Got in my car, drove up the street, up to the house.
But tell them about that house.
For me?
Tell them about that house.
Well, the house I live in?
Yes.
Well, the house I live in was my aunt lived in, and my father's family lived in it in 1906. Lived in the house I live
Where
in,
you are now.
where I am now. It didn't look like it looks now.
Sure.
But you have a picture of what it looked like.
Right, and there's a picture of it in one of the books. Should have been in the last book, but it wasn't.
Well, we'll probably have another book in the future.
Right, but it's in one of the books.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, and I would be at my mother's house every day.
So
Every day.
that
So I do
house-
miss that.
You miss it. And that house was moved from that location in 2005.
Correct.
And it's now on San Pablo Avenue.
Correct.
And what is your hope about what will happen to that structure?
Well, we hope it will become Pinole Historical Society Museum.
And why do you think it's important for that to be the case?
Pinole does not have a museum. San Pablo has a museum. I'm not sure about El Cerrito. But Crockett has a museum. All the towns around
Martinez
here-
has a
Yeah,
museum.
Martinez has a museum.
I mean,
We need-
Benicia has a museum.
Right.
And I mean,
Pinole is a city incorporated. It should have a museum.
definitely. And that was one of the big stipulations when they bought the property, that house would be the Pinole Historical Museum. There's a lot of controversy about it, but at the time when they purchased it, that was their promise. Now, of course, we've gone through how many council people since then,
Right.
but that's not my problem. The problem is, once you make a commitment, you live up to that commitment.
So, for people who are not from Pinole, what advantage would there be for Pinole to have a museum? Because they don't know.
So they know what
the
the real history was of this town, how people struggled, how people suffered in those days with the Depression, how people helped one another when they didn't have anything through the Depression. They took care of one another in this town. They made sure that people, could depend on the next person or the next. My grandmother, that was her big thing, and my father, he didn't get married till he was 40 years old. And they always took care of someone, put them under their arm and said, don't worry, we'll feed you or whatever we'll do. That is what Pinole is about. It's caring about people. And they should learn what this town was like, how it started, how it functioned.
So we're talking about the late 20s, of course, of the
30s
Depression.
and the 40s
Right,
and the
right.
early 50s. And the early 50s.
So what did you notice was really a big shift in the 50s when the homes were starting to be built?
Yes, exactly.
And the
When the
freeway,
freeway
was built.
came through.
When the
The
freeway
ranch.
came through in 1955, 58,
55.
What was it
55.
like for you? Did it?
It was a shock. It was a shock. My father couldn't handle it. All of his cattle were on that side of the freeway, and he asked them to put tunnels in because his barns were on this side of the freeway, and they wouldn't do it. The state wouldn't do anything. In those days, they could care less what they did for you. Too bad. Take your property. This is what you have to live with. So then my father went up and built a corral, and he made a man-made lake, so his cattle, because he had some cattle left that he could go take care of, and then he would have to truck up hay that he
That's up behind the Jack in the Box. You used to go up that hill behind there.
and then
Before those homes were in.
and then he would have to truck up the hay to feed the cattle during the winter. I mean, a farmer, a rancher has no easy life. 365 days, 24/7, and they're out there in the winter feeding their cattle, taking care of them in the mud, in the rain.
Now, are you telling us this because you observed all this as a child and
Yes.
as a teenager, and you remember that?
Yes.
Or did your parents talk about their struggles
I
with
remember
you?
it.
Oh,
You
no,
noticed
we
it.
know this, yes.
Did they tell you?
We
Or you
lived
saw
it. We
You
lived it.
you
We lived it.
Got it.
I've even been out on when one of the cows was having a baby calf, and my father was pulling her out, and he happened to have me in the truck, and he was saying, "Help! You got to pull! You got to pull!" I mean, we were part of it.
Right.
We
I
lived it.
remember one time, Christmas Day,
Yeah.
we're having Christmas dinner, and the neighbor down across from us, Mr. Cicilline, his cow was going to have a calf, but there was breech. So that's when you have to get in there and start pulling that calf out. Christmas Day. I was already married. She
I
was
was
married.
probably gone.
And I don't know if you were here at that time or not. But anyway, Jimmy Cicilline comes up, Bill, my cow's going to have a calf. I need help. So my husband and my father go down there and they pull that calf out of that cow because it couldn't deliver it on its own. Christmas Day.
That was your Christmas Day. What year was that? Do you remember what year
Okay,
it
let me
was?
think. That was probably around 1960. See, James was 62.
We got married in 60.
Say 65.
In the 60s and
Yeah.
mid-60s.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't
yeah,
here.
60s.
Now, before the mid-60s, I think it was you, I remember you commenting one time about having played in an area where the Powder Works company had structures and they tested
Right.
some of their products.
Right.
But of course, you didn't know that there might be any danger with them blowing up.
Well,
But
my
you would-
father, I'd go with my mother, mostly me and Margaret. I don't remember you
Oh,
going
yeah, I
that
did.
much.
I did.
Anyway,
I
out
did.
to Hercules,
13th
Highway
gate.
4.
13th gate
13 gate.
What's 13 gate?
at the Hercules Powder Company. They had
It was a
number
gate,
13,
and that
number-
gate is right where, say, Kinder's is now.
Okay.
yeah, right there.
Right where that Shell station is in Hercules, that's where 13 gate was.
Okay.
That took you back in the hills. Also, there was another spot. You go up Highway 4, go back in the hills of Hercules, like way out in Refugio Valley, way out there, which there was no homes. And these little houses, all you saw was the roofs, dirt up to the roof, up to the rafters right here. Well, that was where they made the dynamite. And they wanted that buried in case there was an explosion. That was helping that, so it wouldn't blow up as much.
Tell them why your father was there.
And so my father was there. My mother would take him lunch. My father was there because he made the fire guards. Was hired by Hercules to make fire guards. Do you know what a fire guard is?
No, I don't.
Okay, it goes around the perimeter of property to dig up the dirt in case there's a fire that stops
It doesn't
the
spread.
fire. That's right.
Okay. Now, what were you doing in those areas? Were you sneaking away playing?
No. I couldn't walk that far. I was way out there. My mother was taking my father lunch.
Oh, okay.
She drove out there in the car and brought him lunch, and we
Okay.
couldn't wait to go because we loved looking at these little houses. All you could see was the roof.
Okay, so you did get to be near those,
Near.
but you weren't close
No, we couldn't
enough.
go look in a window,
Laying
or
around.
if there
No,
was a window,
no.
which I don't
But
remember.
my
Okay.
father would start about 6 in the morning. He'd get up at 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
4:30, start about 6, and be out there till it got dark.
And,
Until it got dark.
Sure.
And I mean, this is the way life was. Now, I lived in Pinole, 2 doors away from her. When I turned 24 years old, my mother and father where the Henry Avenue is, there's that office there, insurance company and a beauty shop or whatever, nails. Right next door, Margaret lives. You know where Margaret lives? All right. My husband and I built that home at 24 years old, thinking we were going to be here forever. 1 year later, after that home's built, we got transferred to Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona. And so I made sure the home stayed in here, didn't
that
sell
was
it
in 62.
till Margaret got married in about 69 or 68, and I think she bought the home in 72. So
They had rented it out.
that whole little street was my grandmother, my mother and father, and then my aunt, and then my other aunt, Alan Faria, Stella Faria's husband Clarence, his mother, they all lived on that street.
We all lived right there.
Big, it's all a family thing.
Now, three females, 3 girls, 3 sisters.
Right.
No brothers, is that correct?
No brothers.
Okay,
That's why my father took all the boys in under his arm, and they were his sons.
Yeah.
right.
Like Stella, that you're going to interview. Stella's husband was always at the ranch.
Always at the
Always.
ranch.
So my impression, and as I've talked to other people as well, is that you're very strong women. You chuckle. You don't believe that.
Oh, I believe it. You were at the meeting.
Yeah, right.
So, what, some people are very timid over time, boys or girls, and some girls a lot.
I would say I'm the timid one.
You're
really.
quieter, but you also have your own strength. And you have any inkling how that came to be? You think it had anything
Yes,
to do
my
with
grandmother.
the time that when you grew
My
up?
grandmother.
So tell me about your grandmother.
Well,
she's
she
tough.
came to this, as I said, 15 and a half years old, meets a man that's 32, and she's 15 and a half and gets married at 16 and has 9 boys. She has 18 pregnancies.
Oh my.
11 grew up, and one of her sons got blown up in the giant powder plant. So, I mean, and I grew up with my grandmother. My father marries my mother in 1934 and brings her to the ranch. Now, my father is a believer that you marry Portuguese. He marries an Irish-German girl. That threw the whole family. My grandmother did not talk to her she nodded to her for 4 years. My father's sisters took her under her wing and kind of, helped my mother to live. My mother's living in the house with my grandparents. My grandfather was a great guy. He was
Right.
quiet and docile and everything.
Right. Yeah, he was quiet.
But
Real
she
quiet.
was the backbone of everything. You can't imagine a woman buying 4.5 acres and starting to get some cows,
Right,
and then
you
she
mentioned
gets
that.
the property behind gets the rest of the property, and she's running a ranch, and her oldest kid is probably 9 years old. And my father tells the story, he was 4 years old, 4.5, 5, when he started milking cows. And she had to depend on some of the young men in town until they could grow up enough to help her. So living with her, she ruled the house. Once a month, she would go to Oakland on a horse and buggy, whatever they went down to go buy. When she left that day, my father, I can still hear him telling the story. She laid all their chores. The silver had to be polished, this had to be clean, that had to be done, boys, girls, whatever. And they said the minute she went out the door, they skated around that house. They just did all kinds of wrong things. And about the time they knew she's coming home, they all got together and started cleaning the silver. And when she got home, she said, I know you didn't work all day. I know you didn't work all day.
So what were those consequences to them?
To them,
I don't know.
I have no clue. I can't give you the answer. So
Somehow it worked though, huh?
But
Things
she
got
remembers
done?
the grandparents more than I do because she's older. They died in 1945 and 46.
one in 44, one in 47.
Okay. So, and I was born in 39, so I was like, 5, 6 years old. You just remember them a little bit.
So does it?
And the other thing, we didn't learn to talk Portuguese
Yeah. that's-
because my mother was Irish and German, and my mother didn't push it. And my grandmother talked to me in Portuguese, and I look at her and I said, I don't understand you. And she'd say, get over here, you're going to learn. I say, no, I don't want to learn. I don't want to. And she'd get so mad at me and then she'd tell my father in Portuguese, ba, 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 ba. And I'm not going to learn. Am I sorry? Very
I
sorry.
was about to ask you that question.
Very
so
sorry.
Over time, that kind of
Right.
family tradition gets lost if the next
Exactly.
generation doesn't
And
continue.
you ask
it.
about those memories to go back. I wished I had left when the city condemned the property, or however, eminent domain, and took the property because we couldn't develop it. I won't go into that story, but I wished I went out and bought a few acres because I miss it so much. Today I can jam and make some things.
Bought a few acres where?
Anywhere.
Oh. I thought you meant that property.
To have property or land of your own, I think is the point. And to grow that and have it be
Yes,
part
I
of your
wish I could
family.
be back there growing vegetables and because I still can't. I make jam and I do a few other things, applesauce and stuff. But you never get that out of your system. You never get that out of your system. When I was at the meeting the other night, I wanted to tell a lot of stories. The days they killed the pigs. I don't think we have.
Killed the pigs?
Yeah, I mean.
Was that a disease? The days they killed the pigs?
No, that was the
It
the
sounds
day they
like
killed the pig, to hang the pig, to put it, my grandmother would make pork roast, ham, bacon, linguiça, morcella, and hang him in her little smokehouse on the ranch. You can't do that today because the
health department probably
health
comes
department would
around.
close you down.
Are you supposed to interview Alan and them because they're
Yeah.
I suppose so, but just as a to conclude this, the usual comment from someone who interviews others is any last words, any parting words, any words to people who may view this, things that you wish you would have, they would know about you as a Faria or about Pinole. It's a beautiful little town. It's my adopted hometown, even though I wasn't, I didn't grow up here.
Right.
I want
it is
this
a great
history.
town.
I
And
want
still
this
live here.
history to be known of this town and what the people did in this town to make it the town they did.
Right.
And there's still a lot of things I didn't even say here. I mean, I brought my book tonight, but I could go on and on and on. I mean, not saying Deanna or Margaret, but I don't think they have as much memories or history as I do because I was, 10, 12,
there.
14 years old with my grandparents.
I might have to come back to you, Dolores. Thank
Whatever,
you so
it's up
much,
to you.
Deanna. So, as the quieter one, were you always the quieter one in your family?
Yes. Always.
And in spite of that, you got to observe a lot of things growing up here in Pinole. So, what would you say are some of your fondest memories of having grown up in those years? And what years are we talking about when you?
I would say the years we're talking about is the 40s and the 50s, 60s. I got married in 61. So the 40s and the 50s.
When you were a child.
When I was a child, yeah. So I was born in 39, so by the time I'm, say 10, I'm out with my father as much as I can. If he's out doing cattle work, I was with him. More than Dolores.
What would you do alongside him? Just ride along with him?
just want, be in the truck. If he was on a tractor, I was behind him on the tractor. If he was in the hay barn, I was in the hay barn. And if he was working cattle, I wanted to be on a horse working cattle, although I really didn't do a lot of that because he didn't sometimes want us around all the time around these other men. But I was the tomboy out of the three.
And you know what? To me, don't tell your other sisters, but you're the fun sister.
The fun sister.
You're the fun sister. Now I know why. You
'Cause
consider yourself a tomboy when you were a kid. You did all
Exactly.
kinds of adventuresome stuff.
Right. I used to hike back in the hills, sometimes just by myself. Just play cowboys and Indians. My younger sister and I would play cowboys and Indians a lot. And you could walk from the back of the yard, from the ranch, where the freeway is now. Of course, that was a hill. We walked right there, back in those hills, playing all day long in the summer back there. I'm Roy Rogers, she's Gene Autry. Having a great time.
Now, in the 40s, when you were 10 years old, did you have any, do you remember now if you were at all aware when the war broke out?
Yes. I remember a little bit of that, say around 1940. See, when did the war end? 45? It seems like I remember the end of the war, 1945.
So what comes to mind?
I'm trying to think what comes to mind. I think we stood out on the front of that front porch of that house, and there was cars going, whoever's going up and down the road, which wasn't too many people, tooting their horns and yelling, "War's over, war's over." I remember that. And back up a little, I remember a blackout one night.
An electrical blackout.
Yes, you
Power
had the power didn't go out. In other words, if you had a light on in your house, you were to put the shades down, everything was to be dark, no lights showing. I guess they were afraid of maybe somebody was coming over or something.
Oh.
So that was a blackout.
Okay.
It's older people remember all that
Okay.
blackout stuff.
Were there any special things that you were asked to do as a child, just in case something happened, whatever that might be, whatever those fears were?
Nope.
Like I remember when I grew up, when I was a kid in the mid '60s, that's when we had drills and we go under our desks.
We did that at
so-
school.
Yeah.
And that was, for, a lot of it was, some of it for the powder works. Case, because when I was in school, I think it was in 1950, I don't know, 55? No, I was in high school then. Anyway, early 50s. In grammar school, up at the old school, the powder works, Hercules powder, there was an explosion. And it was felt. Oh, and I was home at that time. I wasn't at the school, I was home. But it was like an earthquake. Pictures moving. And then when we did go back to school after that explosion, one of the kids in my class, his father was killed in that explosion.
Boy.
Yeah, so that was kind of serious.
Now, in those years, there were fewer families living here in Pinole in the 50s. And let's take that, for example, that death in that family. Was it a town such that people were close to each other and they would do certain special things that aren't done these days, for example?
Yeah, there was like when the Portuguese people would get together and have their festa. Every year we look forward to that very much because people would get together and, we didn't have that all year round. You were just with your family. And so we had it was almost like a big party.
Uh-huh. Like a big block party?
Yeah, right. So they had a festa, and we'd all get together, and just groups of people, and it was fun.
Uh-huh.
Couldn't wait to get together.
So what kinds of things were there to do at these festas?
That's kind of hard to explain. Actually, it was like a parade, and then they had food.
Food's
That was the
always
main part.
attractive.
That was the main thing, and a dance,
Uh-huh.
and an auction.
Uh-huh. Now, in the 50s, that was fun music. I mean, it's still fun these days to listen to music then.
Right. Fun music in the 50s. I don't know what music it was.
Elvis Presley?
Yeah,
No,
no, it
was that
wasn't.
later?
They didn't play that at the Portuguese thing. No. No.
Where did you meet your husband? And how did that happen?
God. I met him in Rodeo. Actually, no, I met him at church in Pinole. Well, I met him in Rodeo first, but that was just very brief. And then I went to, the very next day after I had met him, just very brief, I was after another guy. And then he happened to be there, but I wasn't interested in him. But the next day, he's at church. When I get out of church, there he is, because he went to church too.
Uh-huh. Well, that's St. Joseph's Church?
St. Joseph's Church.
Uh-huh. It's still there.
Although he was
still
from
open.
Rodeo, he was belonged to St. Patrick's Church. But anyway, and he asked me out then. And then it went from there.
So, dating kinds of things that was going
Clear
on here in
Lake,
Pinole?
water skiing.
Oh, so you went outside of Pinole for big
Right.
dates?
Yes.
Big date events?
But you had to come back the same day. No overnight
Yes, you did.
stuff. No overnight stuff.
That's right. Otherwise, what would happen?
Oh God, who knows? Yeah. So.
Well, that's probably what kept the population low for a good while.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
That's
No,
right.
and then I can remember back also in the 40s when my dad was raising tomatoes, and he raised the tomatoes in Hercules for H.J. Heinz.
Huh.
I was in that truck going to H.J. Heinz, and H.J. Heinz cannery at the time, which is still there.
Where is it located? Is it in
It's
Oakland?
in Berkeley.
In Berkeley. Uh-huh.
You come off Ashby, and there's a big building there. It has all kinds of businesses in it now. If you go around onto San Pablo Avenue and look up on top of that building, it says H.J. Heinz.
I'll be on the lookout for that. Next time I write Bart, I probably
Right.
will see it.
And so he would take the tomatoes down there, and they would unload it. And I got to see him coming on those conveyor belts, going down like this. Oh, and I love that.
We're going to let a helicopter go
I know,
by.
let it go by.
Were helicopters around at that time? Not so. Probably this
Don't
wasn't one of
remember.
one of their pathways
Right.
over Pinole.
What did your
Let's see.
husband do?
What did he do? He worked at the telephone company. And then years later, he quit the telephone company, and we opened a restaurant in Napa. So, he also had sold topsoil. And he got the topsoil from my dad's property up behind the Jack in the Box. It was really good loam soil.
I don't know about soil, but I imagine that had a lot of good things in it
Right.
and allowed for big growth of plants.
Exactly.
That's as much as I know.
Right.
And I grew up in a big city, grew up in Los Angeles, and I consider Pinole my adopted town, my adopted
Good.
city.
I'm glad you came here.
And when I arrived, as recently as 1994, I thought, my goodness, this is like country. And we still have a little bit of that feeling, however, not quite, of course, the ranches that included your family's ranch.
Right. It has still a little bit of that feeling, a little bit,
Would you
not too much.
would you say that it's important to maintain that small town feel
Oh,
here in
definitely, definitely. I think so.
Pinole? Yeah. And why is that?
Oh, I don't know. You just don't want to get bombarded with people and cars, and although it is kind of getting that way now. You know,
There's
you
a
just,
little bit more development these days.
Yes,
yeah.
there's quite a bit more development. Yeah.
I still, though, can run into someone at my local shops and the post office that we still have. So it's still
Right.
very nice.
I don't run into as many people I know as I used to. I mean, when there was Lucky's out in Pinole Valley, I mean, there's always several people you would know and stop and talk. And
That's true.
I could go in and out of Safeway today and not know one person.
Yeah.
And that's unusual.
What about the
I mean,
restaurants in Pinole?
That's not the same as it used to be, you know.
What about the restaurants in Old Pinole? What kind of restaurants did you have?
I don't even go to I don't go to restaurants in
When you were
Pinole.
a kid. When you were a
Pardon
kid.
me?
When you were young.
Oh, I don't know any restaurants in Pinole other than my sister's restaurant, but that was after I was
Abilene.
married.
He means before that.
When you grew up, were there restaurants?
Not that, no. We
Well,
never went to restaurants.
Yes, I did. Alibi.
Well, you were already married.
I went in there before I was married.
You did?
Now the
Yes.
alibi was a bar, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah,
a
it
bar,
was a
but
bar.
the couple that owned it, she would take me over to her house, and then she'd take me in the back room with the slot machines,
Oh.
and I'd play the slot machines.
Yeah,
So there was a
that's
little
right.
gambling going
They were
on.
good friends with my dad. Yeah.
Nina and Valpera.
I never went to dinner that kid.
Uh-huh.
No, my parents didn't go out to dinner. No, my parents were very social in their lodges.
Yes.
The Holy Ghost and the Elks and the YLI and the YMI and all that. But
Pocahontas.
But me now, when I turned,
Pocahontas and the Red.
I got married at 18 and a half.
Uh-huh.
So then we'd go down to the Alibi, my husband and I. But the people that owned it, Tony and Mike Lewis,
Stella and Celeste's sister's husband owned that bar.
Uh-huh.
with somebody else.
Where was it?
Where where it's on the corner of Fernandez and San Pablo Avenue, across from Pear Street Bistro, and it was the Alibi Bar, and they served
Known all over.
because it was a Chinese fellow that owned the restaurant part and cooked the best steaks and French fries you could have. So my husband and I, we'd go. My mother take care of the children on Friday evening, and we'd go down there. And because they thought I was Bill Faria's daughter, I could drink. So I drank. They never questioned it.
You lived up to the family name, or what? They just considered.
They just considered it.
you were bold enough to do that.
She was 21, so you
Uh-huh.
still couldn't drink.
Yeah.
I wasn't 21. I was 18 and a half, 19.
Yeah.